Today we celebrate the birthday of one of the most legendary horror figures of all time, John Carpenter. And as you can tell, I'm a tremendous fan of the man. In fact, he's one of those celebrities that I would definitely love to meet one day. I would just have so many questions for him, and I think we could just have a really fun conversation together. Born in Carthage, New York, John Carpenter spent much of his childhood watching classic westerns directed by such greats as John Ford and John Huston. He also gravitated towards low-budget sci-fi thrillers like The Thing from Another World and Forbidden Planet. Dazzled by the sheer magic of Hollywood filmmaking, young Carpenter knew it was his calling to make movies of his own. His fervent passion for filmmaking inspired him to enroll in the USC School of Cinematic Arts. However, the maverick filmmaker dropped out his senior year and opted to instead craft his first feature-length movie. So I have a bit of a history with John Carpenter. For those of you who watched my Gremlins video, where I talked about that film and how it inspired my love of horror movies, you'll know that I wasn't particularly passionate about the horror genre as a young man. In fact, I was scared to watch most horror films, as many kids were, but I was particularly scared of them because, honestly, I wasn't the most courageous kid, and I didn't have much of a spine. However, Halloween was a film that my dad really inspired me to watch because Halloween was my parents' very first date. My dad took my mom to see Halloween back in 1979, and the rest is history. If it wasn't for that movie, my parents probably wouldn't have gotten together and I wouldn't be sitting here today. So I definitely have a history with that movie, but even though I wasn't the most courageous kid, I did eventually watch Halloween on VHS. For those who don't know, VHS tapes are these physical objects that we had to insert into cassette players. The good old days. But it was actually the extended cut of Halloween. I think they showed it on TV like a few times. It was the extended cut that featured that scene where Dr. Loomis actually visits a young Michael Myers in the hospital. But that was ultimately the cut I watched, and needless to say, it really did a number on me. Man, Halloween was definitely the scariest film I had seen up until that point. I couldn't sleep with the lights off. I kept expecting the white face of Michael Myers to just emerge out of the shadows, and it definitely left me rattled, but in a way, it also did make me feel very brave. And I've talked about why I love horror movies. I love horror movies because if I'm able to sit through them, I feel like I've accomplished something. I feel like I've conquered my fears, and I was brave enough to sit through something really horrific, and I felt that way after watching Halloween, so Halloween means a lot to me, to be honest. Oh, and of course, like any self-respecting horror fan, I do have some Halloween merch. I have this Michael Myers mask. This is from the 2018 film, and I keep this on my bookshelf back here. Much to the dismay of my mother-in-law, she does not like this mask, but you know what? It's Michael Myers. I'm not going to just lock him up. He's the man. And of course, I have a small Michael Myers figurine. I believe this was made by NECA Toys. I might be wrong about that, but I keep this on the shelf as well, and this is definitely one of my favorite figures that I own. The only thing that kind of bothers me, I think it would have been a little bit better if, like, his butcher knife had just a little bit of fake blood on there. I don't know. I think that would have made it a bit cooler looking. The next big John Carpenter film that I ended up watching was 1982's The Thing, and I'm just going to say this, a lot of people have praised the practical effects in that movie, and rightfully so. They are astonishing. I mean, they still hold up to this day. The practical effects in that movie are incredible, but The Thing is the film that actually inspired my love of horror movies that take place in isolated locations. I like to watch horror movies where you have a band of characters stuck in the single setting. They can't go anywhere because they are just trapped there, and because they're trapped in a single location, they just get more and more paranoid, and they often turn on each other. I really dig horror movies like this. I just enjoy these types of stories. Another great example is, of course, The Shining. The family in that film is stuck in this singular location, and that film is a hotel. And just the fact that you have all these masculine individuals trapped in a single location, constantly turning on each other, growing more and more paranoid because they're being hunted by this monstrous alien. Yeah, it's just creepy as hell, and it's really unnerving to watch, and it's one of the many, many reasons why I love The Thing. And it's also another example of a film that was much derided upon its initial release. A lot of critics at the time did not care for this movie, and the reason was because it was released not too long after Steven Spielberg's heartwarming E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and The Thing just wasn't the type of film that critics were in the mood for at the time. They weren't in the mood for such a dour, ominous, depressing sci-fi film. They wanted more films like E.T. the Extraterrestrial. But like some of my favorite films, like It's a Wonderful Life, The Thing grew more and more popular over the years, and it is now considered a science fiction staple. It's also a staple of the horror genre. Now, I will admit, I haven't watched all of John Carpenter's movies. I'm really trying to. I tried to watch as many of his critically acclaimed films as possible. I haven't seen some of his quote-unquote worst movies like Ghosts of Mars or Vampires, just because I'm not particularly interested in watching them, but I do want to talk about his most underrated film, and that is definitely In the Mouth of Madness. In the Mouth of Madness is a horror film that legitimately scared me. Like, I just find the idea of like parallel worlds and dimensions scary, and that film is incredibly Lovecraftian, and it is just creepy and ominous, and it has one of the greatest Sam Neill performances of all time. I really, really like In the Mouth of Madness, and I think it deserves a lot more attention and respect. As far as the worst John Carpenter film I've seen up to this point, I didn't much care for the 1995 remake, Village of the Damned. Yeah, that film was kind of stupid and pretty sluggish, and I just didn't think it was a very good horror remake, and yeah, it's probably the quote-unquote worst John Carpenter movie I've seen up to this point. Now I'd like to talk about three of my favorite John Carpenter characters, the first being R.J. McCready in The Thing, played by the great Kurt Russell, aka the little boy who used to be in Disney films like The Horse in the Gray Flannel Suit. But yes, McCready is a smart, resourceful man. He's kind of a man of few words, like he doesn't really talk much, but you know, you can just tell he is very strong-willed, and he has this great character introduction where he's playing computer chess, and he gets so fed up with the computer that he just dumps alcohol on it. It's just so great, and he has so many badass moments in that film. Like I said, the reason why I like McCready so much is because of his intellect. There's that famous scene where he's testing the blood of everybody because he knows the alien's blood will react in a certain way once he gets it hot, so yeah, he's a smart character in a horror film. And he's played by Kurt Russell, so what's not to appreciate? Another character I love in John Carpenter's filmography is, of course, Laurie Strode. You know, Laurie Strode is, you know, the final girl. She's everything we think of when we think of the final girl in a horror movie. You know, she's smart, she's a virgin, which Carpenter has gone on record saying that, like, it wasn't his intention to punish the promiscuous characters in Halloween, but it just ended up happening. But Laurie Strode is the survivor in that movie, and again, she's smart. You know, she finds a way to defeat Michael Myers. You know, she uses a coat hanger to stab him in the eye, and even though she probably should have stabbed him a few more times during the film's climax, she's proven to be a very, you know, resourceful character, and that's why I appreciate her so much. Jamie Lee Curtis's whole career started because of Halloween. You know, she'd become a legendary scream queen after that, and it's all because John Carpenter took a chance on her, even though she wasn't particularly impressed by her performance. In fact, she called John Carpenter at one point, you know, aiming to quit the movie, but he told her that she was doing a tremendous job. So thanks John Carpenter for giving Jamie Lee Curtis a career. She's gone on to become a very well-respected and dignified actress.
To all of the people who have supported the genre movies that I have made for all these years, the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, we just won an Oscar together!
My third favorite character in a John Carpenter film is none other than Archie Cunningham in Christine. I just like his character arc. You know, he starts out as this dweeby nerd who doesn't have very many friends, and he's bullied relentlessly, but you know, he grows very attached to this car that he discovers in this junkyard, and it turns him into this cocky, arrogant, mean person. He essentially becomes the type of person that he resented at the beginning of the film because he becomes a huge bully. And I mean, true, he dresses like a 50s greaser, you know, later in the film, but I just really like the character's arc in that movie. I like the idea of this insecure nerd who gradually becomes more and more confident and eventually becomes a cold-blooded killer. Not inspiring, but it is an example of a character who shows tremendous growth in a film. So I really like Archie Cunningham. And of course, Archie Cunningham also inspired a character in the much beloved Halloween Ends, that being Corey Cunningham. But we're not going to talk about Halloween Ends here because that film deserves to rot in a junkyard.
Fuck you!
What I really like about John Carpenter is his attitude. If you've seen him in interviews, you'll notice that he has a very sarcastic sense of humor. In fact, he was asked about all the remakes that were being made of his films, and he said, you know what? Every time they remake a film of mine, I put out my hand and a check falls into it, so... He just cares about the money at this point. Most of the remakes of his films, he had little to no involvement in, like 2005's The Fog, 2007's Halloween, directed by Rob Zombie. But of course, he would go on to become very involved in the newest Halloween trilogy, directed by David Gordon Green. The first one being a success, the other two not so much. Although I personally enjoy elements of Halloween Kills. He's also always had a bit of a rebellious spirit, which probably stems from his indie filmmaking roots. I mean, he's very much, anti-establishment. He has a very fuck Hollywood kind of demeanor, and he's not really interested in filmmaking anymore. And probably because he had some bad experiences with studios over the years, and I think he's just done with filmmaking at this point. But you know what? He left behind a great body of work. So, even though he isn't particularly fond of the art of filmmaking anymore, he's made quite the name for himself, that's for sure. And of course, there's his often striking cinematography. He loves his wide angles, he loves his long takes, and so many filmmakers have paid homage to his style over the years, myself included. When I was in college, I made a short film called What is Art, and there's a scene where a character is driving in a car, and I copied a shot from Halloween, where the camera is essentially in the back of the car, and we see Michael Myers, driving in the front seat. Yeah, I copied that shot in my short film. No regrets. I was inspired by one of the greats, so yeah. And of course, his often chilling music. His musical scores are often tremendous. I mean, of course, there's his score for the original Halloween, that simple dun 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 dun, very basic theme, but it's also very eerie. And his score for 2018's Halloween is it's definitely his best work in years. There are so many tracks on that album that I just absolutely love. My favorite being a track called The Shape Hunts Allison. I think that's what it's called. But yeah, he does this thing where I think what he did was that he took a baton and he just ran it over an electric guitar, and you just get this chilling the screech sound, and just great. And yeah, his style is often imitated but never bettered. The best example I can think of is 2014's It Follows. The director of that film was definitely paying homage to his cinematography style, the long takes, the wide shots, but still, it's no John Carpenter. There's only one John Carpenter, and in my opinion, there won't be another filmmaker like him anytime soon.
What we wanted to do was make a scary movie, and that's all we cared about. It is going to scare the shit out of you.
And like all great artists, his body of work will truly stand the test of time and continue to inspire filmmakers for generations to come. Anyway guys, thank you so much for joining me in my discussion of John Carpenter. Today is the man's birthday, so I felt inspired to make this video. I kind of want to celebrate by watching a couple of his films before my shift starts today. So I might do that. I might pop in, maybe I'll do The Fog and Prince of Darkness. I haven't watched those films in a while, so I think they'd be good to revisit. Anyway guys, if you liked what you saw here, please subscribe to my channel, Round the Clock Frights, for more horrific content. And please share some of your favorite John Carpenter films in the comments. What are some underrated John Carpenter films in your opinion? I would love to hear from you guys. As always, stay scary, boils and ghouls, and yeah. Let's all celebrate the man, the myth, the legend, John Carpenter. He is just amazing, so deserves all our respect.